Ich freue mich, jetzt zu dem letzten Panel begrüßen zu können.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to welcome you to this last panel. We are looking back on 2 very interesting days containing a lot of interesting different perspectives and positions from various countries when it comes to the current situation of Belarus today. Now we want to ask for the future and the perspectives. How are we going to continue? And this will be the final panel or finalizing panel for us. However, we will not be able to answer this question completely. You all have the program in front of you, therefore let me save the time and not mention them by names. I'm very happy to have this very interesting round of panelists here. Mr. Gleibitz has been talking about memories, the time of 1989. I myself have seen and experienced and also actively participated in these times. However, there is one huge difference, namely what was driving us back then and what is different today. We were not facing that much violence. So sometimes, yes, we had a violence for a weekend, for instance. However, then we had peaceful demonstrations. The government was not firing from arms, and therefore we are looking with some kind of awe at Belarus, and we're asking us how people keep going and how they hold on. What is giving them hope? And therefore, let me ask the first question to my panelists. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, let me draw your attention to this very book published by the Heinrich Böll Foundation during the last days, Belarus, the female face of the revolution. And I found a little text in that book that I wish to quote. A lady is writing, "My children are preparing a little bread, a little snack for me, telling me, 'Mom, take that snack with you in case that you do not return home tonight.'" And I'm asking myself, is that normal? Veranika, you belong to the 3 faces who were active before the presidential elections, and you were presenting yourselves in the public before. So we felt that spirit before the 9th of August. At the moment, meanwhile, you are in exile. Marina Gatsikova is in jail. Sviatlana already talked to us in the beginning. It's wonderful to have you here in this final discussion round. First of all, let me ask you, what is giving you hope? What is giving hope to the people, despite that violation and aggression, to not give up and continue?
Excuse me, there will be a translation into Russian or English because...
Gibt es eine Dolmetschung? Dolmetschung ins Deutsche oder in Englische aus dem Russischen?
Ja, man kann in jeder Sprache.
Yes, there is. You may speak in any language that you wish. Just feel free to speak whatever you wish.
Can I respond the question in English or in Russian?
Dann könnte ich auf Englisch antworten.
Ja, auch das geht, ja. Russisch oder Englisch, wie du.
Yes, for sure. Russian, English, as you like.
Хорошо, давайте тогда я отвечу на вопрос на русском языке.
So let me answer the question in Russian then. So first of all, of course, since the very beginning of that campaign, it has been very unpredictable. And so we had joint meetings with Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, with Maria Kolesnikova and myself, and we saw that people are ready for the changes and what's happening right now in Belarus and for the last 3 months. This is unprecedented because we have seen the number of people who come to participate in the peaceful protests. And this is very inspiring to us. So, for example, yesterday, a close friend of mine, a course mate, my fellow student, was released from the prison, and he's like, telling me that people get like 15 or 20 days of prison because of participating in the protests, and then they spend 2 weeks in prison, like 15 days, and then they return and they continue participating in the protests, even despite of what is happening in Belarus, and we need to continue working and step up the effort in the international arena as well, because like we cannot return home for political reason. And I am very much inspired by the Belarusian people and the way they fight back, stand up for themselves, even despite the repressions that are happening in Belarus. This is very inspiring for me.
Diese Hoffnung erfüllt die Menschen.
Well, this hope is filling up people's hearts, and you've said that quite clearly. The question, however, is how do you achieve this goal to get people into the streets by a decentralized way? There is no head of the demonstrations. There are decentralized structures that organize themselves via social media. Can you tell us something about the network itself?
Hast du mich verstanden?
Did you hear me, Veronica?
No, because unfortunately I do not understand more German. Could you please translate into Russian or English? Because
how do you see that decentralized situation? And could you explain the network? How does it organize itself via the social media?
Should I speak in English? Is it easier for you? Can you understand me?
well, I can speak English. I can speak Russian. So could you please repeat the question then?
Versuchen Sie die Frage bitte noch einmal zu wiederholen.
Es gibt ja für diese
Well, there is
Planung der Demonstration offensichtlich
this planning of demonstrations, and obviously there is no head that is planning everything. It is done in a decentralized way. People have a lot of imagination in organizing themselves. Could you tell us something about these networks? Are you surprised yourself, maybe, how people organize themselves, not only in Minsk, but also in the whole country in a decentralized manner?
Well, actually, yes. As you said correctly, the people, unfortunately, the leaders are not allowed to be on ground. The leaders are not allowed to be in Belarus. The strong leaders were put either in the prison or they had to leave Belarus. That's why people left by themselves. But as we see, as the history shows, the leaders are born right on the ground. The leaders are born in the, in the factories, in the small, like communities everywhere. This is what really surprises us as Belarusian nation, and this is surprising the entire world. And it just goes to show that the Belarus nation was born, and we are very proud of it.
Dazu geboren ist. Da sind wir sehr stolz drauf.
Ganz herzlichen Dank. Ich möchte auf André.
Thank you very much, Andre.
Du bist noch im Lande, das heißt,
You are still inside the country, and you have we just had a big congress organized, telling the truth or tell the truth. Now tell us something about your experience. How do you deal with the decentralized mobilization of the people? And second question, what is the relationship and the communication between the people in exile and those in the country that you're trying to mobilize and motivate?
Yes, I know. Thank you all. I don't know what language, but now here translation from my side. First of all, thank you, and it's honor to speak here. I would maybe say about your first question about decentralization protest and how is it possible to people to go to the streets for so long, having such a big pressure from the authority side. To be honest, I think it would be impossible without all efforts that Lukashenko put in it. I think that he gave each week arguments for people to continue. From starting from the 9th of August, when we've seen such a brutal and violent actions from special forces towards people, and continue. I mean, from that perspective, I think that the most powerful side of the current protest, of the current movement for change in Belarus, that people all together has the same reasons, but each of them has it as its own. I mean, of course, all people go to the streets, and not only streets, because the movement for change is bigger than just Sundays marches. That's all those actions we see in yards. There is a huge wave of solidarity. There is the online action. So there are many of them. So I would say that from one hand, we see that people really all together want to live in different kind of a country where there is a rule of law, when they can elect the power, when nobody is beaten or detained because of political position. But at the same time, each of them has its own personal reason why they're there, why they do so. Whatever it could be, kids, or future of their kids, or maybe they such a disappointed seeing such a behavior of authority in the country, or any else. So from that perspective, I would say that decentralization is something really new and something really showing us that we have so good perspectives in Belarus. I mean, I've heard about perspectives of Belarus for so many times on different forums for last 10 years. You know, each time we talk about not the current present, but about perspectives. But before that, it was always about economy. It was more about maybe our geopolitical things, or that Belarusian in the center of Europe. But now we see that society is ready for different future. Society is ready to build this future and take a responsibility. So from that perspective, I really today am very pleased to say that yes, there is a great perspective of Belarus, because people are ready to take an action. As for the coordination, I would say that today there is a huge and big need from the society side, that people who represent them somehow on different places, on different platforms, are in coordination. That's true. But I think the main coordination today is going on not within the kind of structures, but on the public sphere, where we saying our demands and are more or less the same, when we are doing what we can do on the field where we're staying in. And from that aspect, I think it is as well very good strategy, because it's like in many hundreds of efforts of leaders, united because of the one strong idea of future Belarus. But in that respect, I would maybe finish here. I think there is an important task we need to do now, all of different leaders, whatever they are outside, I hope very temporarily, or they inside. I think what the main damage authority did for last months, they are destroyed national consensus. I would say we definitely had it, some kind of consensus talking about, for example, religion, talking about our attitude to violence, talking about, for example, attitude to different political views, for example, about symbols like a national flag or state flag. It looked like till the August, that we can live with both of that. We can find the common ground for different kind of views. So, but independence, we all stand on the rule of law. Right now, that's a clear division that Lukashenko is trying to draw, and actually he's quite successful in that. That you either support violence without any limitations, you either support this kind of radical and unacceptable to diversity attitude, or you are against, or you are not acceptable in the country. I think that's important to understand in this big movement of change we have now. We have very different groups, different of their views about the future of Belarus, different of their views about geopolitical, for example, orientation of Belarus. But I think we need now start work on this new consensus that whatever it will be, 5, 10 points, that whatever leaders will be in power after Lukashenko, whatever leaders will be in a position after Lukashenko, we will agree on basic things, and we will all say those are things we are stay on whatever you are, and this will be new background for national consensus that we need if we want not destroy but really build a prosperous future of Belarus. Thank you so much.
Verstehen, einen solchen Konsens zu suchen.
Understanding to bring up such a consensus is intense. Maybe one should first start with the preparation of a new constitution. I've heard that what Lukashenko is asking for or demanding with the new constitution is rather just postponing the actual decision-making process. So, but the first thing that you need, what you say, is the consensus. So maybe you need re-elections, first of all. Is that important, or do you see differences of opinions in the movement? Do you know that the consensus is that new elections are a priority? Would you like to answer that question yourself? Or shall I ask Veranika afterwards, maybe?
André,
I would say
noch einmal
that
zu dieser
this
Frage?
new consensus, it's something, it's kind of a, I'm sorry to turn off the, this new consensus is kind of a task for new leaders that we need to build and present to society. And as for the question about constitution, I think personally, I don't believe that Lukashenko wants change a constitution and it will be referendum or whatever, because I think regime can't really win over any kind of national campaign right now. So I think he will just try to postpone it as much as possible. But at the same time, it's a fake dialogue about constitution. So we can't really say about it as about consensus idea. And here, I think it's one important thing, and I think you spoke about it once on our forum about the trust. Constitution is something, new constitution even more, is something that can be built without the basic trust in society, without the basic trust between the different sides of society. This trust is destroyed within the Belarus. I mean, it's built in this kind of, in this part of society where we are all for change, but it's destroyed like an idea in our country. We don't trust Lukashenko. We don't trust to groups that represents him today. So that's why we talk about new election as a first step, because this is the way how to build trust and then to start such a complicated and difficult discussion about constitution. Otherwise, we could come to the situation when we have not new constitution, but hundreds of new conflicts because of lack of trust around us.
Es braucht ja mit Sicherheit einen strukturierten Dialog
You will surely need a structured dialogue that will push things forward step by step. First of all, the violation has to stop. Political detainees have to be released. There are a lot of people detained who have to take part in that dialogue. Therefore, we have to there has to be a breakthrough. So the acceptance of re-elections, new elections. What is your perspective on that? Franak, maybe. Great to have you here.
So basically, we are having, thank you so much for having this discussion, this conversation. I think we have multiple tasks right now for Belarus. On one hand, we have to keep protests ongoing and to spark it with energy, with ideas, with positivity, with victories, small victories, large victories, because the protest is the basis for any transformation, for any changes, and for the emergent civil society as well. But on the other hand, we have to think about reforms, about the future of Belarus and what will be after Lukashenko. And the thing which stands between the current protest, the uprising, or the revolution potentially, and this new Belarus, when reforms will start, is this new election moment. And this new elections is something that we are fighting for, but something which is not acceptable for Lukashenko at this moment, not acceptable for Russia, unfortunately, because in this situation, they will lose control over the country, over Belarus, over political scene. And this is the main issue, and this is the main problem why this dialogue doesn't start, because the interests of the sides are very, very different. People of Belarus who are suffering, who are fighting, who are sitting in jails, they want the moment of change. People who are in power or supporting the power, they want status quo. What we are working right now, we are working on the scenario or the model, how these new elections can be conducted in order to fulfill demands of the people, but also to guarantee to the people, not Lukashenko himself, but people who are in nomenclatura, people who are in business, people who control assets, also to find the place for themselves in this new Belarus. So I don't speak here about the guarantees that they will stay unpunished if they commit crimes. No, all guilty will be punished for sure. But we are speaking about finding the balance and to make sure that all interests of all sides who are not guilty in crimes, who didn't commit atrocities, that they will accept this new reality. And this is why this plans for new elections we are preparing. We worked with the specialists of elections, including those who worked with OSCE, and they advised us that elections in Belarus can be actually conducted under current electoral code. We basically don't need to change everything. We don't need new constitution to conduct new elections. We just need to train commissions. We need transparency in how commissions are formed from the very bottom level to the very top. We need international monitors, as it happened in Ukraine after Maidan. Ukraine conducted 2 elections in 6 months period. And altogether, it will be enough 45 days, up to 60 days, to have these elections. So what we need to convince the people that this is the only solution, and we need to start the dialogue with those who represent current regime, that there is no other way out of the current crisis other than a dialogue. Lukashenko could be the part of this dialogue, but there is a very little chance, and this chance is fading out. More likely, people who are in the current regime and who wants to stay in this new Belarus, they will be a counterpart in this dialogue to Coordination Council and Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya.
Herzlichen Dank. Ich denke, damit sind schon wichtige Stichworte angesprochen.
Thank you very much for raising these important topics. We will delve into the detail later. Katsyaryna, Shmatsina, here's my question for you. How do you assess as an analyst when looking at the process? So what do you think? Is this perspective sustainable? In the first 4 weeks, nobody would have thought that everything would take so long, so many weeks until winter. The winter, however, is still long. And the question, how long can this be sustained? Also, how long is Russia going to watch this? How long will Russia back this still President Lukashenko?
Greetings, happy to join the conversation. So, first of all, yes, indeed, the protests are lasting for several months, and for a outside observer, this could look like a maybe not so dynamic situation. We do not see immediate results at the moment, but I think that in Belarusian circumstances, where the power vertical was consolidated for so many years, and we existed in such a restrictive authoritarian environment, the dissolution of the system takes time. And in that regard, we're doing fine in terms of timeline with a protest. And the protest mood, according to independent polls, is strong still, despite all those cruelties of Siloviki and all those months of continuing demonstrations. Independent polls show that people are ready to protest even a year, if that's what it takes to change Belarus to have a democratic country. And also, the international observers should not be sort of deceived by the picture if they do not see massive rallies gathered in one square or on one street on a weekly basis, because the tactics of the protest is changing, and people are gathering in their neighborhoods. This gives people more trust among the local communities, and it gives them more opportunity to self-organize. And when you look at international media, like maybe you won't get those impressive pictures and numbers of hundreds of thousands people gathered in one place, but it doesn't mean that the protest is fading away. And people also use the covert techniques of resistance, such as work to the rule, strikes at workplace, and there are also evidences of sort of distrust inside the power vertical and multiple leakages of information linked to Telegram channels and media among those people who work in the power vertical but are afraid to speak up publicly. So that's just on the protest side. When we talk about Russia's interest, I would say that on the surface, it looks like Russia rhetorically supports Lukashenko, but when we look at the facts of what it was the actual Russia's support during past month, it looks like there is only this much sort of level of rhetorical support. And Lukashenko understands that so far he stands in power to a great degree because of Russia's support, including like financial support. But Russia can withdraw this support. And it looks like now Moscow is rather calculating their options and carefully observing the dynamically changing situation. And on our side, I mean, as a Belarusian society, we understand that for Russia, it is more likely scenario to not to acknowledge the directly the win of the democratic protest for sort of the authoritarian leaning government in Moscow, and for them the more favorable option would be to support some sort of constitutional changes. But I think there is still room for negotiations and contacts on behalf of Belarusian democratic forces with the Kremlin to ensure Kremlin that Russia won't lose Belarus, and that the Belarusian democratic forces stand for good relations with Russia and with the West. They seek to have this balance, and they do not run on anti-Russian sentiment.
Eine ganz zentrale Botschaft, dass es den Protestierenden und
this is a very central message.
Das ist ein freies Belarus, das die
So it is very important that it is free Belarus, that there is no choice between Europe and Russia. So they don't have to choose between the two. So they have to self-determine what they want. And this is key aspects. However, the question remains,
ja, noch agierende Spitze des Landes wie Lukaschenka
how the
reagieren wird.
current
Die Ankündigung
head of the government, namely Mr. Lukashenko, will react. Katsyaryna previously said that there were other meetings for dialogues, but they were fake because only loyal, Lukashenko loyal people were invited. So a real dialogue in between different people, opponents, different forces and powers, something like that has not happened yet at the round table. The round tables that we had in 1989 in Poland, in the GDR, and Hungary had this instrument, so to speak. And this instrument was only strong because it was clear that the still existing government had no other solution than inviting the new political power, the people who were supported by millions of people in the streets. Therefore, this continuous demonstration and the demonstration of the will to protest is the prerequisite in order to have such a dialogue. And it has to break through one day. Now, my question is, how can you make such a start? How could such a start for the dialogue look like? Or would you rather say that on the level of the protesters and of the opposition, however they might call themselves, you don't see a possibility because you're not only the opposition, it's rather a full movement of the whole society. Now, how can you start such a procedure, such a step into this new procedure of finding a dialogue? Maybe you should resist first and show to Mr. Lukashenko that he has no future and he should step back. Veronika, could you say something on that?
Teilnehmer.
Did the participants hear me? The question is namely, how do you start a dialogue in such a situation? Do you think this is possible? Despite the whole violation and brutality, maybe first of all, you are focusing on the fact that you want to show to the regime that you're going to stand your ground. Veronika, did you hear me? We've got acoustic issues, is that correct?
Dann würde ich doch etwa sagen, wir gehen weiter.
Maybe we'll just go on until Veronika can come back to our discussion. Andrei, may I ask you, what is your position towards that topic? What is your impression? Microphone.
Complicated question, because as Franak said, we're all for dialogue, but definitely the dialogue seen by democratic side and by authorities in a totally different way. For Lukashenko, dialogue today is when everybody should come and say that's okay, we're okay with violence, we're okay with your 80%, we're okay with your next 5 years, so what can we have for it? And as we know from the previous experience that the result will be nothing. You know, I just want to remind that we already had a dialogue, and it was a strategy of tell the truth that I'm leading. In 2015, we actually offered to society and authority the concept of peaceful change. An idea was that, okay, let's evolutionary go step by step, changing our political system, you know, and being prepared for new challenges. And as a result, we had no members of local councils in 1918, no members of parliament 2019, yes, and the election and last election of president. So I would say, I think today it's time for dialogue within this huge movement for change. I think it's time for us to learn how to negotiate and how to find a compromise between us in different aspects. From that perspective, I think we need, and all the efforts that leaders should, let's say, should have now and do now should be about this dialogue within the change movement. As for the dialogue with the authority, I think it should be first step from authority side, and I see the clear step that it should be releasing of political prisoners and it should be stop of violence. Otherwise, I think there is only dialogue which is possible now is dialogue about something very specific, and this dialogue should be totally public. For example, if there could be possible dialogue about, for example, freedom for political prisoners, yes, this kind of dialogue is possible. Or if it's dialogue about, whatever, how this new election should come, could we organize all together. But I think still it will be difficult to talk when you understand that you should come to talk to the authority, and on the same day, on the same time, you have hundreds of new political prisoners, you have new detained people, you have political prisoners already in jail. So from that perspective, I really doubt that now it's time of dialogue. I'm sorry to say it. I think we should it's I hope it's our perspective, quite close future perspective. But right now, I don't feel and see that Lukashenko is ready for dialogue. And I can tell you one argument why he's not ready. I'm finalized. And why Lukashenko is not ready right now? That's because what Katerina mentioned, that yes, this movement of change is, let's say, changing. It's changing its tactics, but it's still very strong. And Lukashenko understands now that to go in a clear dialogue, an open dialogue with this movement, will be for him to be on a very, let's say, weak position, which he doesn't want. He still believes that together with help of Kremlin and Siloviki, he can first erase the protest and then to go in kind of a dialogue, which will be not dialogue at all. That I see as his strategy right now.
There was a great wave of solidarity all over Europe and among all neighbors in order to help to achieve what happened in Belarus. There was a high level of readiness to accept people who went to exile. During the first panel, we thanked our partners from Lithuania and Poland who were very cooperative and ready to take people into exile, political exile. Franak, you are an advisor for Sviatlana Tsakala, especially for this international context. There was a high level of acceptance for these three women, but also for others. There was a symbolical award, the Zakharov Award, that they've been granted, and heads of governments all over Europe congratulated Ms. Merkel, the French president as well. Please tell us, what do you think, what else should be done in order to increase the pressure on Lukashenko? Do you see any special necessities?
Thank you for such question. Actually, visits of Sviatlana and Veranika and Volga and everyone who are not in jail and able to travel abroad and to speak about Belarus, very important, because it delegitimized Lukashenko, but also it legitimized the new majority. And Sviatlana and her meetings with the high-level politicians and state leaders, it's the way of recognition not of Sviatlana, but of Belarusian people who is suffering, fighting every day, inspired by the idea of democratic country. Sviatlana's goal is to raise awareness on one hand about what's going on in Belarus and pass the right message, but on the other hand, also to get some support for Belarus nation. And this support can be given in three major forms. One is assistance. We speak about technical assistance, about promises of future packages of financial support, so-called Marshall plans, very often used. And actually, the idea of Marshall Plan, of naming it as Marshall Plan, was born during a visit to Berlin. About support for transition period, when it will be a very tough time and Belarusians, especially those repressed by regime, will need help. Like small businesses whose businesses were closed after people's ultimatum, they will need financial money to restore their operations. This is about assistance. Assistance also include money for lawyers, for human rights defenders, for media. I know that Germany considers launching Deutsche Welle for Belarus service digital operation. This is all very important to keep energy, to give energy to people on the ground. The second pillar is pressure. And pressure, it's not just sanctions. Sanctions also are very different, but it's also delegitimization of the regime. And delegitimization can take place on different layers. Not recognition of Lukashenko, not sending ambassadors, not providing credentials to Lukashenko, diplomatic credentials, blocking Lukashenko's Olympic Committee from participating in Olympic Games for repressions against sportsmen. This is everything about delegitimization, and this is also the pressure on the regime. Like the threat to cancel ice hockey championship in Minsk, this is also pressure, because it all perhaps pressurized not Lukashenko himself, but his cronies, people around him, and elites that are remaining and still sticking with him because they are trying to survive the bad times, and they still hope the situation will get back to pre-election normality. And the third pillar of this action of the West, of the world, is the justice. We are in the situation of the legal default in Belarus. There is no justice, there is full impunity. People in Balaclava beating and killing people as normality. And processes and initiatives like international investigation, bringing cases to national courts according to universal jurisdiction laws, very good cases to help people restore a feeling of justice. Many of the victims who lost their legs, eyes, who will become handicapped for their entire life, they want to make sure that their sacrifice will not die in vain, that all guilty will be punished. And this is why we need to find together the ways to punish guilty, to punish those guilty. Idea, for example, to recognize, to designate Gubopik and OMON as terrorist organization is the way to punish and not just one individual easily identified through the official website, but to punish all the soldiers. Today we knew that former Ukrainian Maidan's Berkut officers are participating in crackdowns in Minsk. So they also must be on the sanction list, and designating the whole organization is the solution. International Tribunal in Hague only accepts cases from countries that ratified Rome Statute. But perhaps we can work together and advocate for the way to use other institutions like European Court of Justice, perhaps. There is a Syria case discussed there. Belarus situation is non-conventional, and the approach to Belarus, assistance, pressure, and justice needs non-conventional approach.
Vielen Dank, Franak. Dirk Schübel, du bist der Repräsentant der Europäischen Union, du bist gewissermaßen...
Dirk Schübel, you represent the European Union. You are the face of solidarity of Europe in Minsk. And what are your direct experiences with the people? Do they see this? Is our appearance, our public appearance enough? Or where in communication with and towards Europe are there deficits? And something that you then would also communicate to Brussels.
Continue in English, if you don't mind. I think it's easier for the other participants also to understand directly. Very pertinent question. I think we as European Union here have a very, I would say, almost neutral role until now to play. We are not considered to be, on either side, either good or bad, and that is also a proof that this is not a geopolitical conflict that we are facing here. We have seen in the many demonstrations hardly any European flag so far. So this is, I think, a very good sign that there's a lot of possibilities for us to shape our position, as an honest, not broker, but someone to help in this situation and to provide our support to the population. That is what we also have been trying to do. We do not interfere, contrary to what Lukashenko and his surrounding or Russia says. The EU is not interfering, nor do the member states. We are trying to help in principle to reach out to the people. We have indeed, as you rightly said, Markus, launched a number of actions in the last few weeks, in particular human rights related actions, because we saw that there has been indeed a lawlessness, as Franak mentioned it. People have been beaten up, tortured, whatever, killed even. And we had to do something against this, apart from the falsifications of the elections, which was the starting point of the whole issue. So we intend to do more such actions to demonstrate that we as European Union, and not only me, by the way, I'm one of the faces. We are here a big team, the EU, the ambassadors of the EU member states, and myself as the local. We are also working very closely and cooperating with the US colleagues on the spot, with the UK, with Switzerland, with Japan. We are a big team here and standing in for human rights. What can we do more? I think we can do, of course, more on the economic side. We have our leverage has not been very big in the economic sense because our support has not been very big because we never wanted to give too much money to this country under this leadership. But as Franak also said, we have a plan in the making. We don't call it Marshall Plan. I think it would be too big to be compared with the Marshall Plan of the past. But we have what we call comprehensive economic plan for a democratic Belarus in the making, which will be taken out of the cupboard if and when democratic changes are taking place, and if and when, of course, also the new Belarusian authorities then will want to have this support. Then we stand ready to step in. And as I said, I think the most important thing is that our position here, there's no black and white thinking in Belarus. I think we are accepted as an interesting partner on the Western side, and we can shape our position to the positive. And that is what we have been trying to do already, and that we should continue to try. However, what is also important is that the expectations to the European Union are not too big, because we are 27, we have to take everybody on board. We are in the middle of a huge COVID-19 crisis, which costs us a lot of funds to refurbish our own economies in the next few years. But obviously, we do not want to stand idly by if a democratic process comes underway here in Belarus, and then we stand ready to do so. And we ambassadors on the spot and the missions here, of course, in the first place.
Ganz herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to ask welcome the other European ambassadors. They say they very much welcome this forum because they perceive themselves as part of the European voice. Now, I have another question. Where can we be helpful when it comes to supporting the internal process for a potential communication and mediation process? The OSCE is ready to take on such a role. We have Michael Link here. In his past, he headed the Office of Democracy Promotion in Warsaw. So he is an expert on exactly these topics. He is now an MP in Germany. At the same time, he is also a vice chair of the Human Rights Committee of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. Which role could the OSCE assume based on your experience and impressions? Thank you, Markus. Can everybody hear me?
Könnt ihr mich hören, Markus?
Can you hear me, Markus?
Hallo, Markus, könnt ihr mich hören?
Hello, Markus. Can everybody hear me?
Wir können Sie hören, Herr Link.
Yes, Mr. Link, I think we can hear you. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for organizing the Minsk Forum. It is really great.
As Dirk Schubel did, I think it makes it a little bit easier for all the participants to follow the points. Indeed, OSCE has a numerous and very important toolbox and numerous instruments at hand which could be used. The problem is, of course, that until now, all the instruments which are at disposal have been rejected by either Belarus and or Russia or both. And this is indeed a very dramatic situation because OSCE has developed all these instruments and toolboxes in order to exactly overcome such a situation where we have a stalemate and where the government, in this case, President Lukashenko, is denying the dialogue. He wants to have only some sort of controlled dialogue. I call it a vertical dialogue. But what we would need is a horizontal dialogue. As Markus Meckel rightly said, the pressure from the street, from demonstrators, is really important to open the road for example, roundtables or something like this. OSCE has repeatedly offered to negotiate, to mediate in such a situation, to come as a neutral, completely neutral broker, and OSCE has a role in this because Belarus is participating actively in the OSCE. It is not active, as you know, in the Council of Europe because of a lot of reasons, but OSCE is a participating state. Belarus is a participating state to the OSCE. So there is a leverage there. And there are numerous commitments of Belarus in the OSCE where Belarus under Lukashenko is in clear violation of these commitments. That is why the incoming chairmanship of the OSCE, Sweden, has announced a very active program from January where they want to table and to increase the pressure on Belarus to answer and to respond to the calls for international mediation. And this has to be, of course, extended also to Russia, because we all know that until now, Russia is not interested in having OSCE as a negotiator, as a mediator in Belarus. That is certainly something why we need to increase the pressure not only to Belarus, but also to Russia, to allow for the OSCE to play its role what it's designed for. We heard, and rightly so, I completely agree, that new elections certainly could be done even with the existing electoral framework. ODIHR could come and monitor and observe these elections. Of course, you need, and that has also been rightly put, of course, by Franak, you need new people in the Central Electoral Commission, you need new people in the territorial electoral commissions, but you can do it with the existing framework. So ODIHR and the OSCE could not only help with a framework leading to negotiation and roundtables, it could also help in monitoring and observing the elections. ODIHR could help with screening new legislation, helping and assisting in doing new legislation. The Council of Europe has already offered the Venice Commission, especially when one day there is really a new constitutional process, then of course the Venice Commission should come on board, because where is the most respected mechanism and institution when it comes to constitutional reforms? That is the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe. So, but that is also something where we need to join international and to mount up the international pressure in order to get these international institutions on the ground in Belarus. What we can do is support what is happening in Belarus in terms of demonstrations. We can support the civil society. We have the main obligation not to close our eyes, to keep always what is happening in Belarus on the agenda, not to forget what is happening, not to play into the hands of Lukashenko, who wants people to forget and come back to some sort of normal. I think there OSCE also plays an enormous role in order to simply keeping this issue on the international agenda. And right now, today, we have the OSCE Ministerial Council. The Parliamentary Assembly is in our statement today on the Ministerial Council, in the presence of the Foreign Minister of Belarus. We will clearly address the problem. We will clearly also raise the problems in order also there to do our job, not to close our eyes and to keep it on the table in order to, and that's my last point, to document and to really to establish and to collect the facts on human rights violations, because they need to be well documented, that in order in future, of course, if need be, they can also put to criminal courts if necessary.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Michael. Mark Hauptmann, Sie sind schon lange.
Thank you, Mark Hauptmann. You have been active in and with Belarus for a long period of time. You know the country very well. You have economic relations to the country. The German parliament now adopted a resolution that clearly supports the transition in the country. Now, what do you think about this? Germany is doing a lot, but what are the focal points of the future?
This event in a digital framework, and I hope that we can all meet soon very much personally again. Your question is right. The German parliament wants to support, and our coalition government just introduced a debate in parliament and also a resolution where we basically continue this process of supporting the initiative of the opposition in Belarus, calling first for stopping the violence against the peaceful protesters. Second, to free the political prisoners, which are at the moment about 120. And third, to go forward with the way of organizing free and fair elections. So those are our main topics that we introduced. As the chairman of the German-Belarusian Parliamentary Group, I also engaged with Libereco, Partnership for Human Rights. And we want to make sure that especially the political prisoners in Belarus are not forgotten. And this is why we now have over 50 members of the German parliament taking like a partnership for one of the political prisoners, where we want to engage with them as far as it is possible. We want to raise the voice for them if they cannot be heard spending their time in prison. And we want to use media, social media, and our ways of communication to make sure that even if Belarus gets out of the headlines in the newspapers, the people are still not forgotten. So I think there's a lot what members of parliament in Germany, but also all around the globe, can do in order to send a strong signal that we are standing behind this movement of free and fair elections. We want the violence to stop, and we want to release the political prisoners. Regarding the economical question that you mentioned, Markus Meckel, I presented an idea last year in 2019 to both foreign ministers, Heiko Maas and Valery. And the goal was to introduce a strategic advisory group from both sides, Germany and Belarus. And this strategic advisory group should come up within 1 year with ideas how to basically intensify the cooperation between our two countries. We wanted to go into a new decade with fresh ideas of supporting initiatives that bridge our two countries, not only between Germany and Belarus, but also between Europe and Belarus. And we started actually this process of the strategic advisory group in January this year. And when Corona basically hit both of our countries and basically the world, we continued this process also in the digital framework. Of course, this procedure is now suspended after the elections, but we are willing from the German side, if those measurements are introduced and followed, free and fair elections, stop of violence, release of the prisoners, to continue providing a strong framework between Germany and Belarus, and to continue this strategic advisory group. What do we want to do? We want to strengthen our cooperation, especially in the IT sector, in tourism, in the economical cooperation. And we were pretty concrete, identifying also projects that are interesting for Belarus, for us, and this basically led to stronger partnerships in the digital world. For example, stronger cooperation with the high-tech park, supporting small and medium-sized businesses who are especially hit in Belarus now through the coronavirus. We wanted to support the logistic partnership of Belarus, and therefore continue what Belarus already started in respect to the Belt and Road Initiative. We wanted to support ecotourism and intensify our energy dialogue, and also prevent that the energy imports from Russia dictate also higher prices for Belarus. So we already talked about reverse flow capabilities of Nord Stream 2 to support also Belarus from the German and from the European side, and also in order to have a stronger position in negotiating prices with Russia. So there are a lot of initiatives that are on the table, and we would love to continue with this process. But I'm very sure that we cannot continue this process with the current government of Mr. Lukashenko, and of course not as long as those three pillars are not fulfilled that I talked earlier about.
Dass die Nachhaltigkeit der
So the sustainability of attention, of support, and a strategic support is necessary. This is basically what you have just highlighted. Our problem is the direct, immediate help and support, which is absolutely necessary. If we, for instance, hear how many people have been injured that have to be treated, I mean, they are treated in their hospitals or in hospitals in Belarus, but I'm asking myself, and I have done this many times in Parliament and also vis-a-vis the government, would it maybe make sense for us in Germany to bring 100 or 150 injured people here? We took Navalny in, who got intoxicated in Russia. So given the huge number of people who got injured in Belarus, why not receive these 150 injured people here to our hospitals and assume all costs? Of course, everything has to go very fast, but this is just one example or proposal. Here's another suggestion. It refers to exile. We said thank you, also our foreign secretary said thank you to Poland and Lithuania and also to Ukraine, where these exiles happen, where exile is granted. And of course, this is happening in the neighboring country first and foremost, because it is easy to maintain contact to the home country, sort of. My question for Veranika and for Franak is there a challenge that we as Germans should also open ourselves up as an exile country? Or would you say everything is taken care of? It's better to have Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine as countries who take people in and who are exile countries for Belarusians. But maybe we can start with the question of taking injured people into our hospitals. Maybe Mr. Hauptmann, you would like to start.
Well, I mean, from our side, I think from the side from the German government, from Parliament, we certainly want to help. And if this is a very concrete format where we can help, we can, of course, organize that. The problem I see is since governments only talk to other governments, we need the active willingness of Mr. Lukashenko to also let it happen. So if he prevents medical flights, if he doesn't want us to engage, it's quite difficult to organize that out of the civil society. And we can all see how hard and with what kind of violence he's going after the civil society. But the willingness from Parliament, from the German side, is there to help and to make it very concrete. For example, last week we debated our budget for 2021, and we increased our amount of money that we want to spend for the Eastern Partnership, especially in respect to Belarus. We want to strengthen the civil society. We want to strengthen independent media. The topic of Deutsche Welle was already introduced. But we also want to find innovative formats of supporting social media programs for students and for academia. So all kinds of ways where we could support also with micro-financial help of the European Investment Bank. But the problem is you need a partner on the ground in Belarus with whom you can organize such programs. And traditionally, the government is our partner. But here, in the case of Belarus, this kind of partnership is mainly not wanted and suspended. So this is, I think, the challenge we have to tackle.
Okay, but let me point out that the other questions are also crucial. And yeah, you need partners in Belarus. You don't have official partners in Belarus, but when it comes to injured people, then these things are already happening with the Czech Republic, for instance. I have heard that the Czech Republic has received many injured people, and we are very grateful for that. My question, why are we not doing this in Germany? I think we should just give out a bigger number and receive these injured people here in Germany, in our hospitals. Veranika, is there this necessity? How do you assess this?
Yes, first of all, thank you very much to all European countries for providing help to Belarus injured people, because as you said, we see the examples, a lot of people who came to Lithuania. I'm based, for example, in Latvia, and Latvia accepting a lot of Belarus injured people as well. Thank you to Ukraine, thank you to Poland and other European Union countries. It's a great help for us, for Belarusian people. I would say if Germany can help us to accept more injured people, because currently we are receiving so many requests from the injured people, especially from the injured women and girls, because we started collecting the stories about the girls who was raped, who was beaten up, who was tortured in the prisons. And we would definitely be appreciated if the Germany could accept this kind of people who needs medical treatment. And this is one of the directions, one of the questions we always raise during the negotiations with a member of parliament in Germany, for example, with the government officials in Germany. But as I said, we do appreciate everything what European Union countries do for Belarus now, but there is always room for improvement. Let's put it this way. And one more thing, and one more thing I would like to add on the top of everything everybody said. We want international community to know what's happening in Belarus. That's why we want the media to cover the cover events in Belarus. I also stay in touch with the US media, and the same request we send to US media, because the entire community has to know what's happening in Belarus prisons, especially in terms of the violation of the women rights, because women are raped, women are kept in the anti-sanitary conditions, women do not have the opportunity to take a hot shower. So the world has to know what's happening in Belarus in regards to violation of the human rights.
Thank you very much. This is a very central point, which is the information work. We have to provide information to the media. Franak, do you want to add something?
to provide information to media where?
Immediate necessities. Yeah, please go on.
Media necessities for Belarus, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So right now we have absolutely new ecosystem of media formed. During 3 months of the uprising, traditional media entirely rebuilt their newsrooms, their operations. When before August 9, all media were operating on the websites or radio or TV when we speak about state media. But suddenly after August 9, everything moved to the emergent platforms and Telegram became the main platform. And we see how traditional media and traditional websites like Belsat, Radio Free Europe, even state TV channels, they are working, operating in the same way as Nechta news in the first days of protest after August 9. Basically, right now we have many media that became Nechta suddenly by accident. And we have to invest right now in 2 tracks. One, to make these new emerging media initiatives that popped out after August 9, like independent local chats, groups, regional outlets on Telegram that are uniting local initiatives, channels bigger like My Country Belarus, Belarus of the Brain, and Nechta. We have to make them sustainable. So if we speak about investment in such resources, we have to make them more looking as traditional media. Then they will survive and they will serve us in the future Belarus as traditional media outlets. And on the other hand, we need to make the opposite process for traditional media, old school media, which always had more organized processes, but which were too slow and not enough flexible for the new reality, the reality of blocking internet every Sunday, the reality when Telegram is the main platform for majority of population. And we have to help them to use emergent platforms and to become more vibrant, more innovative in terms of content, and also to work more with user-generated content. We see that at this revolution in the last 3 months, citizen journalism became a life savior for media outlets. And if I would be media manager at this point, I would invest not just in hiring new and new journalists, but I would invest in hiring citizen journalists, those guys who are sending short clips, pictures from the protest, sharing the videos about their communities or the flags on the balconies, because they are real content creators. And we have to train them how to work in this new reality, how to work with a new platform, and how to work with the content creators.
Herzlichen Dank, Frau Shmatsina. Katarina.
Thank you very much, Katsyaryna. Could you say something about the perspective on the pressure of further sanctions? Are further sanctions necessary quickly? What do you expect from them, and which type of sanctions do you think would make sense?
First of all, sanctions are important to the extent that they put pressure on the regime, but we have to learn from previous years where sanctions, EU and Belarus have a long cycle of sanctions, distance, and rapprochement. And we have to learn from previous mistakes and maybe look at previous cases, what did work, what did not work. But this time the stakes are higher. We did not just ask Lukashenko to liberalize the environment or possibly just release the political prisoners. Now the conversation is about his resignation, new elections, and stopping this legal default and this outrageous situation with human rights. The packages of sanctions that were already implemented and the ones which are considered, they imply sanctions on the on persons and firms which support the regime. The problem, or maybe the difficulty with the sanctions, is that it could be difficult for or it could be perceived with controversy on behalf of Belarusian population when and if they feel that their own well-being is impacted by the sanctions. So the sanctions should be targeted and should target those persons who directly support Lukashenko and directed at people who are complicit in tortures and human rights violations. And did I answer your question, or you have some additional comments?
Herzlichen Dank, das war schon sehr gut.
Well, thank you very much. This was very good. There was a question coming from the chats. Our audience wanted to know that. Another question from the chat, maybe. Andrei, I would like to ask this question to you. Do you expect that next summer Lukashenko will still have these security forces and torturing people?
Do you know something about summer that we don't know? You know, I still think that it's impossible to predict anything, and I think everybody who's trying to predict is always about manipulation. But I would say that I think that definitely that the first half of the next year will be kind of a key stone moment for Belarus, and I hope that as you said, next summer. I hope next summer Lukashenko will not anymore rule of all Belarus, not just Siloviki, you know. And I think that right now we're gonna have next 3 very intensive and very difficult months, and I think that within this month, I think till maybe March or April, it will be clear. We will clearly see the difference and balance. That it will be changing balance between protesters and Lukashenko. And I hope, of course, and we do all our best that this should be on the side of those who are today for change, for rule of law in Belarus. So our expectation that next year Belarus should have 3 kind of elections: presidential, parliamentary, and local one. And that's a huge challenge for all of us if we talk about it seriously, because that means that we should be prepared for all of those, because right now it's clear that there is a kind of 2 camps, where the one of the camp is just Lukashenko with all his circle, and another camp is people who want to change. But once it's going to be new election, whatever it will be, the electoral codex, I agree with Franak that it's possible to handle elections with current electoral codex, at least presidential one, because then maybe we need big change for new parliament to be sure that new parliament is really represent people and is democratic and ready to do very difficult reforms in the country. But nevertheless, I think we should be prepared, because after the Lukashenko will step down, or it will be clear that he's gonna step down, we will see new forces in Belarus. It could be forces that will be inspired by Russia, or that could be other forces with different views. And if we will not be prepared for these 3 important campaigns, we can win revolution but lose the future. And that, I think, is important to understand right now, thinking about next year.
Ganz herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much for this perspective, for this forecast on the next year, and for not only focusing on that question, but let me ask it: for how long Lukashenko will be in the government? And also the question is what your own perspective in Belarus is. What has been said as the last point is very essential. that it's about the force, the strength of the people in the streets that will give you the strength to have a look into a good future. You have to know today what you're against and that you want to have democracy and self-governance, but you have to be aware of the fact that democracy and freedom requires diversity and differentiation. So acceptance and tolerance, and also the organization of diversity is important against a dictatorship or an authoritarian system or a violent dictator. So you want to achieve a differentiated society that will be able to face all conflicts that might pop up in the future and will be able to organize itself in these new conflicts. This is a huge task that this country will be facing. Thank you very much for uttering this very challenge at the end right now. Let's have a look back at the incidents of the 4 months of the last 4 months, and let me wish you all the best also for everyone who is committing to a new future. And we're looking at the future with a lot of hope. We hope that we're going to be able to organize a forum, a Minsk forum, that will invite the whole diversity, the whole group of these people who have these new ideas, and then we'll be happy to present these ideas to our partners from the European Union, and the partners from the European Union will be happy to advise. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for participating. Thank you very much for submitting your questions in this chat, and thank you very much for attending this conference within the last days. Let me hand over to Wolfgang Krippel, who will have a few finalizing remarks. I'd like to thank everyone, the core team, the project team in our headquarters, Philip Hetzberger, Hanna Novara, and Robert. And if we were in a conference hall, we would give you a big hand right now. But ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all thank our interpreters. Thank you very much for your work, for your support. This was not an easy task to do. We had, as it was expectable, a few technical issues. So thank you very much. Markus, thank you very much for your last moderation. Goodbye. We'll meet again in Minsk next year.